Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'll give you the first question. What do you see as the most pressing issue facing our society today, and how do you plan to address it?
I think the disillusion of our democracy is probably the most urgent issue. And I've worked my whole career on democracy and corruption issues in politics. And so um, I will stand up for democracy and for the people of this district. I will represent the people of this district as my top priority. And I am committed to that. And so for me, making sure that we stop the hatred and the fascism that we're seeing in the extremist wings in government is something that's of critical importance to me. And that means strengthening democracy. And that's my goal as a candidate. And that's been my goal as an advocate.
Okay. Considering that your campaign's main focus is on corruption, what measures do you propose to promote transparency and accountability in government?
Yeah, well, I've long worked to make sure that there are competitive races in New Jersey. The ballot line issue was something I was taking on as a state director of a statewide organization. And I believe we need to be very careful about money in politics. The Open Public Records Act in New Jersey is under duress, and that's something we need to pay attention to right here in New Jersey. And in Congress, we need to make sure that we're voting for measures like what are in HR1. We've been endorsed by End Citizens United, which has got a whole platform of things, but we don't take corporate PAC money. And so that's a big way that corporations influence our government, and we need to be careful about that. And we need to make sure that voting rights are strengthened both here in New Jersey and around the country. And so I think those are some key pieces right there.
Okay. Uh, can you elaborate on your plans to protect access to contraception and reproductive choice, particularly in light of recent challenges to women's rights at the state and federal levels?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If Tom Kean keeps power, there's no evidence at all. If he's held office, there's no evidence at all that he will do anything to help women and anything to help contraception or women's reproductive health care in any way. He's never once stood up to his party. And so he didn't do it as a state senator. He hasn't done it as a congressperson. So the idea that he's going to start doing it now, or like there's some big red line he won't cross, seems delusional. So if Donald Trump is elected and Tom Kean keeps power and the Republicans keep the House, then we could be looking at a federal abortion ban. And so as someone who has been working on that issue in New Jersey, it is something that I will fight to make sure we do not have a federal abortion ban. And likewise, we need to make sure that contraception is widely available for women so that we don't have to have abortions. They can be prevented before pregnancy even starts. And that's, to me, a comprehensive plan that touches on women's rights and touches on the rights of families and the women's abilities to plan their families. And all of that is a cornerstone of women's rights.
How do you intend to address the affordability challenges faced by families in our district, especially in regards to housing, healthcare, and other essential expenses?
Yeah, people in our district and around the country, but around New Jersey are really having some hard times. I mean, housing costs are extraordinarily expensive in New Jersey, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, I know that young people in particular who I've encountered are absolutely furious. I mean, government has never worked properly in their entire lives, in my entire life almost. Federal government has been almost non-existent in its ability to solve problems. And the people who bear the brunt of that are people, young people, are people who are working very hard, sometimes multiple jobs. And that's terrible. It's exhausting. And to not even be able to afford housing or healthcare or to be laden with student debt is really problematic. And so I will work very hard. I mean, there's a lot of sort of economic policy that we could talk about, but the thing you need to know is that I've been working very hard on these policies in New Jersey politics. And I come from a background of caring deeply about people who are struggling to make ends meet. And that's something I will work hard to do. I want everyone in this country to have a fair chance at a decent life. And when I see powerful people taking advantage of that, of those dynamics, it makes me very angry. And that's when I get into fight mode. And so you can be sure that when I'm in Congress, I will fight for those things.
Uh, can you name a specific policy that you propose?
What do you mean? A specific policy that I'd propose if I'm in Congress or
Yes.
that I've done? I mean, I'd support HR1.
Okay. You mentioned restoring the salt deduction for New Jerseyans to prevent double taxation. What steps will you take to advocate for this change? And how do you plan to garner support from lawmakers across the aisle? How do you plan on changing the tax code?
Well, I will work first with the delegation here in New Jersey and then with the delegation of other blue states where Trump's attack on blue states has taken place. If Republicans were smart, like if Tom Kean were smart, he'd be working a lot harder on this issue. He's not. It's the Republican Party who's stopped it. So you could imagine a coalition that included Democrats from all over the country, and then some Republicans from blue states teaming up. But Tom Kean doesn't have the creativity or the coalition building skills to put that together.
Okay, what specific policies will you advocate for in Congress to address climate change and protect our natural environment, considering the urgent need for action to mitigate its impacts?
So I've long been an advocate for the Inflation Reduction Act, of which the Green New Deal was a big part of that. And so we need to invest large amounts of money in upgrading our infrastructure and making sure that America is independent through renewable resources on energy. And I would imagine I would and have in my life worked on land use policy, worked on anti-flooding measures, worked on making sure that people have the ability to rebuild after a flood, and those things are done in a smart way, a sustainable way, being against warehouse sprawl, all these things combined, especially in this district. I mean, this is a beautiful part of New Jersey. It's a stunningly gorgeous part of New Jersey. We have lakes and rivers, and we have access to the ocean and the Delaware River, obviously. So this part of New Jersey is very much at risk, and the lifestyle here is at risk. And so for me, climate change, the environment are very key policies in every area of our district, from Warren County and Sussex County, where there are farmers who are affected by climate, and also just like the flooding that we had this week, to places like Rahway and Lambertville, which are older towns that are also affected by flooding and land use. This is an issue near and dear to my heart. So I would support continued investment in climate, but also in the ways that mitigation on these things affects people's everyday lives.
Okay, how do you plan to balance the economic interest of our district with the need for environmental sustainability, particularly in addressing issues such as overdevelopment and warehouse sprawl?
Yeah, I don't see these things at odds, actually. I think what makes this part of New Jersey so special is that it is so unique, and it isn't like other parts of New Jersey or the sort of famous parts of New Jersey that are extremely sprawl oriented and trafficky. And so I think what makes, people come to this part of the state is our natural beauty. And so retaining that is a really critical piece to our economy because it's so unique. And, warehouses can be built either in areas where there were already warehouses or there was already land, but there's no reason to convert virgin farmland or virgin forest to things like warehouses, and we can build on places that have already been built on. And there's a lot of areas in the state that need environmental cleanup. And so I would start there to make sure that we're building on areas that have already been kind of used, and we can leave the unspoiled places to their own devices and foster wildlife and a healthy ecosystem here in New Jersey.
Okay, can you outline your strategy for working with local communities to address immediate environmental threats such as flooding and changing weather patterns and ensure they have the necessary resources to adapt and mitigate risks?
Yeah, I've done this for a while. So I've been a community organizer. I've been working in communities on a host of different issues, from air pollution to schools to tax incentive policy, to hiring referendums. And so there are a lot of tactics we can use to get into people's communities and make sure that they're aware of these issues and they're getting what they need. There's organizations on the ground who are doing great work. So I would probably, working on this issue, I'd partner with the groups that are already doing this work and see what resources they need.
Okay. Given the importance of preserving open space in our district, what legislative initiatives do you plan to support to protect rural communities and natural habits from unsustainable development practices?
So I think from a federal standpoint, we need to make sure that farmland is protected and old farmland is protected, but we have to give farmers the compensation that they require because that land is their retirement plan. And so federal money can play a role in closing that gap where the state can't. And similarly, we can fund resources to parks, state parks, open space initiatives here in New Jersey, because this is some of the last remaining space in the state and some of the most important parts of the watershed. So investing in that makes a lot of sense.
What role do you see grassroots groups and community organizers playing in your efforts to address environmental challenges and promote sustainable development in our district?
Well, I'm very familiar with the Tox Island Dam project, which is up in the Delaware Water Gap. And the reason that dam was never built was because there was a huge outpouring of grassroots support to save Sunfish Pond and the areas around the Delaware Water Gap. And so I believe in the power of grassroots movement. I believe in the power of the grassroots movement in this district. And I believe in the power of a movement that crosses partisan lines around the environment. People live in this part of the state because they care about the environment. Young people, it's their top issue. They don't want to inherit an earth that is not as nice or as fruitful as the earth that their parents and grandparents enjoyed. And so I see this as an issue that cuts across party lines, cuts across age lines, and it's one we can definitely mobilize grassroots on.
How will you advocate for a livable wage for all workers at the federal level, and what policies do you believe are necessary to achieve this goal while also supporting small businesses and economic growth?
Yeah, I mean, New Jersey led the way with a minimum wage of $15, and working families was a big part of that. And so were the grassroots groups down in the post-Trump era. So I think the minimum wage needs to be a federal issue, and I would fight for that.
Okay. In the past, you have supported universal health care and is not mentioned on your campaign website. Did you change your stance?
I haven't exactly changed my stance, but I see universal health care as kind of a North Star. We have to work very closely with all stakeholders to make sure any kind of government program around healthcare is sustainable financially and does make sure it can scale at a level it can support everyone. So I would like to see a public option and an expansion of the ACA as an incremental step, and I feel like that's a doable step that we can get in the near and short term.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the Israel and Palestine conflict? When you are in office, how will you approach the situation? How do you view the role of the United States in facilitating a resolution to the conflict, and what specific steps would you take to advocate peace and stability in the region?
It is an awful tragedy. What happened on October 7th was a terrorist attack, and Hamas must be held accountable. At the same time, there are people in Gaza who are suffering and starving, and that is also a humanitarian crisis. We need to make sure as much humanitarian aid as possible can get in to Gaza as soon as possible, and we need to make sure the Israeli military is allowing that to happen. I think moments will occur. I think there's an opportunity for long-term peace in the region, but it's a very difficult moment, and a two-state solution and peace and autonomy with both the people of Israel and the people of Gaza needs to be the long-term goal. And so far, I think the United States has done a fairly decent job being leaders on the world stage on that issue, and I commend the Biden administration for that. But it's a very difficult issue and an awful, tragic situation, and it's an absolutely heartbreaking moment in world history.
What are your thoughts on the Russia and Ukraine conflict? When you're in office, considering some Republicans are against funding to Ukraine, what are your thoughts on it to promote peace?
Well, I think that Ukraine is unfortunately at the front lines of a international fight for democracy, and we have to continue to support Ukraine at this moment. And we cannot let Putin invade Ukraine without a fight, and we can't let him. I don't think he'll stop after that. So I stand in solidarity with the people fighting in Ukraine. They've been invaded, and we need to make sure, for now, that the U.S. supports Ukraine. And I'm frustrated by the Republicans who seem to make that less of a priority on holding that idea hostage for other priorities that are more domestic leaning.
Okay. That's all I have for you. Thanks for joining.
Okay, great. You take care.